Today's episode of the Inside EVs podcast is brought to you by E-Range EV Tyre. E-Range EV tyres are specifically engineered for electric vehicles. Using an advanced manufacturing process called liquid phase mixing, E-Range EV's EcoPoint 3 technology creates a tyre with lower rolling resistance and longer range, while offering low levels of wear and high grip. All this while staying affordable. Go to erangetires.com. That's E-R-A-N-G-E tyres.com to find your EV's next set of tyres.
Well, good morning, everyone, and happy September. It is September 1st. Welcome to the Inside EVs podcast. I am taking over for Alex right now. He is on a little bit of a leave, but he'll be back hopefully next weekend. And we'll also have hopefully Patrick George. We have a couple new faces here as guests on the podcast, but we have a lot of news today, which is really exciting. As I'm sure maybe some of you have heard, there was some breaking Tesla news overnight, so we'll be talking about that today. There was also a study that came up by Recurrent Auto that talked about some DC fast charging and degradation and how it compares to AC charging, so we'll cover that as well. Volvo teased a new MPV EV, so that is a multi-purpose vehicle. It's called the EM90. We'll talk about that. Fisker showed off Pear, so their new Pear vehicle that's going to have more photos and more info in an article that InsideEVs posted, so we'll get into that a little bit more. Price cuts on the Model 3, which we can now assume, assume that there was a reason why, and that's because we've got the Project Highland on the board now. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about Elon's demonstration of FSD, but let me introduce to you some of our new guests here, and of course the Miss Hazel, who is regular alongside me. We have Kevin Williams, who is a freelance writer, and he has worked with InsideEVs before, but he's going to share some of his experience on the Rivian Dual Motor that some of the journalists have driven over in Normal, Illinois. And then we also have Jeff Perez, which congratulations, Jeff, is the new managing editor over at Motor One.
Hey,
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why is there a difference between like Normal, Illinois, and like what's the
Not
other
normal?
type of Illinois?
Haha.
I don't know. That's a great question. Who can answer in the comments?
This is a genuine question. Is that a place name?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
The city of Normal, Illinois.
right. Okay. Yeah.
That's where Rivian's factory is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, welcome, everyone. We appreciate you all joining us today. I think we are going to start off pretty quickly with the big news of the Tesla Model 3 refresh, which is Project Highland. If you haven't seen, a lot of new details about it. It is technically a mid-cycle refresh. There's also some videos posted. Yep, I saw the Motor One had a video out, along with a couple other journalists, got a first look and talked about some of the advancements here. As you can notice, not only on the exterior design, there are some upgrades for the front fascia and the rear tail lights, but a lot going on as far as aerodynamic improvements. We also have the interior, I think looks really nice. Almost seems like they took the refresh of the Model S and just kind of slapped a bunch of that stuff in there. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But so far, what do you guys think of this new refresh? It's been highly anticipated.
I like it. I mean, I think it's pretty subtle. Obviously, just the headlights, taillights, and some stuff on the inside. But I think this car was long overdue for a refresh, and I think they did a good job of just subtly updating it, but not going too far in the other direction to where it sort of might put people off.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with that. Now, you said a subtle, it was 6 years, I think, since the Model 3 had launched originally, so that's nice to see that they're going through kind of like a mid-cycle at this stage. Model S is how long in the tooth now, though? I'm excited to see what they end up doing with that next. But what do you think, Hazel?
I mean, it definitely still looks like a Model 3, obviously. And the changes, yeah, they are subtle. I guess if like villainy on the podcast yet again, but I feel like the problems with generally like the appearance of Teslas and things aren't, or stuff like the bodywork and things aren't. I don't know if an update this minor really kind of like feels like that fixes any of those for me. But like, if you have a Model 3 and you were thinking of getting another one, then like here's a slightly different looking one.
I'm not convinced this is enough.
No?
No.
Why?
I think the car looks fine enough. But I just think that, when the Model 3 was introduced versus what the EV market looks like now, I really wonder if this is enough to keep this car competitive, especially in overseas markets where like there are more cars of this shape, coming out every day. Other than that, I have like no strong feelings to what Tesla did to the Model 3. But once again, I just don't know. I don't know if this is enough, but we'll see.
Time will tell. Now, let me just give a couple more specifications and differences here to kind of lay it out for the audience. We don't have figures as far as the EPA ratings go in North America. There's no estimated delivery at this stage that I've seen this morning. I mean, that could change at any time. People are expecting there to be some kind of announcement for the North American market coming soon, but all we've really seen is details for China and details for Europe. And as far as the Euro details go, the standard range rear wheel drive is going to have a 344-mile range on the WLTP cycle. The long range version is going to have 421 miles on the WLTP, and those are both with the 18-inch Aero wheels. So they have a new wheel available. It's not this one that you see on the screen there. It's the 19-inch. But you can see on these wheels that there is this piece that comes around the exterior that's like a fascia, so that helps improve the aerodynamic profile, but it still makes the wheels look a little bit bigger with those 19 inches. The aerodynamic profile, since they modified the front fascia and a little bit on the body, is 0.219 coefficient of drag, which is an improvement from the previous version of 0.23. So that is really great to see, and I think that's generally where we're seeing a lot of the range improvements here. So they're saying it's about an 11 to 12% improvement over the current Model 3, that's a big feat. So it just shows that aerodynamics is really important when it comes to range with EVs. There's also suspension enhancements. So hopefully it's going to ride a little bit better than the previous version of the Model 3. I know there are some journalists that are going to be publishing rides and drives for today, so we'll have to stay tuned for that. The steering wheel is stock free now, so just similar to the Model S launches, they put the turn signals as a button on the steering wheel. And the shifting is in the touchscreen, so people will need to get used to that. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. If you hate or love that.
I hate that so much.
Yeah.
I
think most
agree.
people do.
That is exactly the sort of thing that like makes people describe EVs as this like emotionless kind of like ordering at McDonald's experience that's like completely detached from driving or whatever. Because like, yes, if you're having to like go through a menu in order to do something, then it doesn't feel like you're connected to the vehicle. It doesn't feel like you have that direct kind of control. And like, I come from a country where like everyone drives stick still, pretty much. Like, or well, there's been a shift in the in the last 15 years, but like, almost all cars in the UK didn't used to be automatics. And so it's not like a novelty to me, and I don't fetishize it in the way that some people do, as like this pure driving experience. I actually think like automatics are extremely fine and like convenient to drive. But yeah, the idea of shifting on a screen, like that just sounds, I mean, aside from anything else, bad and dangerous.
It's just unnecessarily complicated. And it's the same thing for a lot of companies that stick their air conditioning controls and screens that you have to press, 3 or 4 buttons just to turn the fan speed up. Like putting a shifter in the screen is a needlessly complicated thing that I think they're just doing just to be, just to minimize the amount of stuff in the cabin. But I think at the end of the day, it's worse for it.
Yeah,
Now,
I wonder what those will be like, when these things start making their way as used cars. Like, will those touch controls hold up? And I'm not convinced. But once again, we'll have to see, right?
yeah, I think it opens the door also for the legacy automakers to make more intuitive vehicles. I mean, that was when I reviewed the Nissan Ariya, and I thought that was one advantage, is that some people don't want such a tech-heavy vehicle, so they'll go for something that feels more like a normal modern-day car experience instead of being so tech-heavy. But, a lot of people that adopt Teslas, they are the kind of tech crowd, so it doesn't surprise me too much that they're kind of going in this direction to minimize the parts that they're using so that they can optimize that profit margin, as Tesla usually does. I will say I thought it was kind of interesting. They also added a rear passenger screen, like in the Model S, for the Model 3. So now you can adjust climate controls. You can also access the entertainment and music to be able to have those back in the back seats. They also added ventilated front seats for the Model 3, which I thought was very interesting in this kind of entry level range of getting, it's like, supposed to compete with the, 3 series of things that are of smaller size. But they're starting to add some more of these like luxury type features, which is, Tesla does play in the premium segment. And I think it's about time that, everyone knows Tesla is fast. They do really well in performance. They do very well as far as range goes. They're very efficient, the best on the market in that case across EVs. But now they're integrating ambient lighting that you can change, and these perforated ventilated seats. They also added 17 speaker sound system on, I think, the long range version, when it was 14 previously. So they also soundproofed all the windows. So they used to have the front windshield and the front doors acoustic, but now the rear doors and the back window are also soundproof. So interesting, right? Do you guys think this is kind of indicative to like going more on the luxury side of things?
Yeah, I think so. I was going to say it's weird that they put that screen so low in the back. I think that would be, I like having the screen back there, but trying to look down while the car is moving might be, that would make me car sick.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, does that mean that the back seat can like I'm just imagining arguing with like a teenager over the music in the car. Like can the back seat completely control the front seat stereo? I don't know.
I guess you would have to give them control, maybe. I don't know.
I think it's separate, right?
I thought it was separate, but I haven't played around with the new Model S screens back there. I've been in the back seat of a Plaid, but I was not concerned about the screen back there. As you can imagine, I was like this, glued to my seat. But yeah,
next time I'm in an Uber, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, go ahead and check it out. Yeah. There's also word that the price is going to be a little bit lower, and that's why we saw in other Tesla news that the price of the Model 3 had dropped. I think it was like $5,500. So that's kind of interesting because that does show that in the US market, we're probably going to get this updated version sooner than later. And I've also seen that in Europe, some of the German market will receive this vehicle starting in October. But a lot of other markets are showing that they're going to get it at the beginning of next year, so people can place their orders. But this will come out relatively soon for at least the German market that I read. And who knows for the US market? We'll have to keep our eyes peeled. Any thoughts on those price cuts, guys? I think this is interesting because Tesla has so many levers to pull, and price is just one of them. They could also offer software packages as far as discounts. They could also offer free supercharging miles. This is just one of the things. So I think it's kind of interesting that they're dropping the price for this vehicle, which, you know, makes sense if they can reduce the parts. Apparently, there's 50% that's changed in this vehicle as far as from the previous version of the Model 3. So that's a lot.
50% of the parts have changed.
That's what I heard in some of the videos that I watched.
That's like, I mean, so conceivably, if you completely change everything or like that amount of supply chain, then yeah, you could be making that saving on a real level. And this isn't just another kind of like Tesla just cuts the price, even though that isn't necessarily kind of like a sensible point for profit or whatever. But changing 50% of the parts of a car in the current global environment where it's like, if you have solid supply chains and if you have parts that fit together well and that you can actually produce and that you can get to factories and get that distribution, that's a lot to change. Like that is like to me, that would, especially if I'm in the Tesla logistics department, that would be pretty like nerve-wracking, terrifying in terms of being able to deliver that. And like, I hope that they can, but that's a lot.
I think, you know, it's since they have a lot of those parts from the Model S, it probably helps as far as making it efficient based on that supply chain. But that's why I'm like, well, what are they going to do with the Model S then? They got to do something. I feel like that's somewhat cannibalizing if you're offering all these things. And obviously, it is different because it's a full-size sedan and the performance is different. Because I think the 0 to 60 is about the same here still. Even if you get the, you know, the most performant variant at this moment, there isn't a performance variant that they've come out with. There's only like a standard range rear-wheel drive and a long-range all-wheel drive as far as I've seen so far. But if you guys have seen something else, please write them in the comments. But we still don't know as far as what the performance variant would look like. And it seems to me that 0 to 60 in like 4.4 seconds for the best version right now is okay. A little bit different from what we get from the Model S, but still.
Yeah. Well, in terms of pricing, I think now is the time to buy a previous gen Model 3 if you really want one. I mean, I know a lot of people, some of us here especially, aren't like super blown away by the update. And so unless you really need those screens and you really like the new design, I think now you can go buy a nice Model 3 for, what was it, under 40 grand? I think 37 was the starting. So I think that's a pretty good deal, actually.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Without pricing, I can't. Like, if someone were to ask me if they should wait for the new one, I would probably say no. I would say you should buy whatever is on the lot right now, because I think with the price cuts and the tax credit, you can get a base Model 3 for slightly under 30 now.
Yeah, if you get the tax credits. And depending on what state, you might have state incentives too that might be able to add on top of that, which is really impressive.
Like, even if you don't like Tesla, that's a really good deal.
Yep, I agree.
Here's something I want to know, actually. Like, just especially because this is a thing, and this is entirely from my perspective. Like, sorry guys, but Tesla has recently announced that it won't make right-hand drive cars, and I wonder if they're doing that with this remodeled 3, which would be quite interesting for the UK market, at least, because that's a real turn off for people. And like, obviously we're a tiny market compared to the US, we're a tiny market compared to Europe, where everything's left-hand drive. I completely understand it, and to be honest, well, my car, until she got towed this week, was left-hand drive. So like, I don't personally have a problem with it, but I do wonder if that's one of the things they're doing with this, and like, that's something for me to look into, clearly. But yeah,
I think that was just for the big cars, the S and X, that they killed the right-hand drive models, because I think they still move like a lot of left-hand or right-hand drive like a 3 and Y in like Japan,
Higher
and
volume
India.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I saw that they will be selling it in Australia too. There were some on their website. Their refresh of the Model 3 was listed. So, I mean, that's usually a good indicator too. You can see if Australia gets it and has the right-hand drive version. All right. Anyone else want to have a mention about the new Model 3? The Project Highland finally has come to life. All right, let's move on then. We're going to talk about our next story, which I believe is the Volvo that is the EM90, which is an MPV, a multi-purpose vehicle. We won't spend too much time on this, I don't think, just because it is a tease. They are going to reveal more details come November. But so far, what do you guys think of this? Have you seen the teaser video that they put out?
Why is there like an airport lounge in this car from this video?
I think that's what we're gonna get.
Yeah, this feels like a very Chinese oriented vehicle where they love big vans like this. Like you'll get a big luxury VIP van that seats two. So
with two huge loungers in the back seat.
Yeah, like I think like if you look at like GM China's like total sales volume, like I think the Buick vans make up like a huge sales percentage of that brand. So it's kind of a no-brainer that they're gonna do that. Volvo would get in on this, right?
Yeah, I mean, electric vans in general make a lot of sense to me, and I'm actually surprised. Well, we don't know for sure that they're not selling this in the U.S., but I wouldn't be surprised if it's not for the U.S. But I think it could be interesting in the States. I think buyers maybe. I mean, we definitely don't love minivans in general, but an electric minivan with a really nice Volvo, esque interior, I think could do really well.
Especially with like Volvo's safety record and stuff, like this is the kind of thing that could be appealing. I guess like to me, I find it so weird, like the stuff that's marketed in China from legacy automakers. I kind of hate that phrase, but like everyone's determined to sell these gigantic vehicles, but like if you actually look at what the majority of people are buying in China in terms of the volume of sales, it's actually really small EVs. And I find it kind of baffling that people are chasing this particularly. There's got to be a saturation point of people who want giant vehicles in that market. And I don't know how many more you can bring out to scrabble for those scraps, really. Like, especially because Volvo isn't really a very luxury brand.
Yeah, they're more like the premium, they kind of more define themselves as that, as more than luxury. But I think, being owned by Geely, this is just probably another thing that they're coming out with, that they'll use whatever tech that they're using in here to slap on some other product or other brand that they own. So, and like you said, it's perfect for the Chinese market where they love to have, a chauffeur and they sit in the back seat and someone drives them where they need to go. There's a lot of space. It feels like an airport lounge, which I'm sure they would love that. But I would like to, I think, because, I feel like even just for example, like the Volkswagen ID Buzz, there's a lot of buzz around it, and it's the only like van style that is, coming to the US that's fully electric that I've heard of. And it is the one EV that I keep hearing from people that they don't have an EV and they're interested in EV that they like fall in love with. And of course we have the like Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrid here, that is relatively popular as far as minivans go. But I think the lane is really open, and that's what I find interesting. I don't know so much for a premium segment because a lot of people have kids and they, expect things to get trashed when they have kids running all over it. But I don't know, maybe. I mean, there are a lot of families with Escalades, so what do you guys think about that?
I think that's definitely a take. I was also looking up like how it's really hard for us to conceptualize how popular and how expensive these big vans are in China. Mm-hmm. Like I just looked it up. The top trim of the Buick GL8 is $100,000 US. and then like Lexus's equivalent can reach like $200,000 US. So I understand from like a business perspective why somebody would want to build a big van like this. I wouldn't be surprised if it's also like similarly expensive wherever it's going to be sold. Do I think that'll be like here? Do I think that they can charge those prices for that here? Probably not.
No
But
way. I think if
no.
Volvo or anybody else did an electric van in the US, it would have to be competitive with whatever three-row crossover. So in this case, like an EX90, 60, maybe 70 grand for a really nice one. But I think they do make sense. I love the ID Buzz as someone who has never owned an EV. I really find myself like, and I don't have any kids or anything, but I still would love to drive an ID Buzz. I think that would just be so cool. So I think electric vans definitely have a place. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the EV movement can sort of bring them back to the US, hopefully.
If you made a really nice, like really clever camping trim of this, that was like a really good kind of like, you can drive it to like, I mean, this is the way I think, but like to Le Mans or like a racetrack, and you've got like a really nice kind of outdoors, like a camper, then yeah, I can definitely see a point to that. And like, there's definitely a market for that. People, especially post-lockdown, like people are going and out more.
Well, it's expected that this is going to be on the same platform as the EX90, hence the EM90 name. And they are going to be building that in the US market. So who knows? We have a sliver of hope. Would you guys buy one? We want to hear it in the comments. Let me know what you think about this. Otherwise, anyone have any other thoughts about this before we move on to our next topic? All right, we're going to talk about the Fisker Pear. Again, this isn't real yet, but they did share some more images. I know if you watched last week or the week before, we talked a little bit about Fisker and their unveiling of all their new products. And they didn't talk about this as much in detail in that unveiling, but the Pear now has more photos, and they said that these are more indicative of what is going to go to production. Now, keep in mind, they originally had a deal with Foxconn to produce this and manufacture it in the Lordstown plant, but nothing has been signed. So where are they going to manufacture this? But it is a smaller, more affordable version. I think he said, you'll see $29,900 for that price point, so under $30,000 with two different battery sizes. You'll see 180 miles or 320 mile long range. To me, I just think that 180 is just not even feasible in this market. Maybe that's for different markets, but it is a, neat looking. You got the Houdini trunk. So you see there on the screen is that whole trunk area will fold completely down, power feature, which seems like an engineering nightmare as well. But it's a more compact vehicle. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on the Pear and Fisker in general.
I think this car is never going to happen.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. We've got two villains here.
And I shouldn't. I'm trying to be more optimistic. Like I appreciate the fact that it looks like such a rolling concept car, but the more you examine it, it just seems like really stupid. Like the Houdini trunk is dumb. Like okay, cool, it retracts into the body, but the aperture is tiny. If you look at the bench seat, it just looking at the back seat and then looking at the front bench seat, it's like it looks like it would be riding in the back of a cop car because it just looks so claustrophobic. Then you look at like the interior plastics, like they're just really basic to the point where it's like look at that, that's horrible.
They gotta hit that 29,000.
Well, if they gotta do, oh my god, that's terrible.
So
like,
in a rare act of non-villainy for me, I like this interior, but it's because it reminds me of like beloved Twingo, R.I.P. Or well, maybe I'll get her back, who knows? But bar that big screen, I actually quite like the kind of plasticky interior. It looks quite tactile. But I think this car is ugly as hell. And the idea of being at like the supermarket and being like, damn, my trunk has stopped working. Just like, no.
It also has that flipping screen where you can do it vertically. You press a button and it turns vertical, which is another thing that can just break. But I actually I'm the minority here that I think this looks awesome. Let's say what you will about Henrik Fisker and his previous business ideas, but he knows how to design a car. Like this thing looks really, really good. Will it ever come to market? I don't know. They've been putting out prototypes and concepts for years now, but I'm super hopeful that it does, at least just so I can drive it and see if those plastics are really as bad as they look.
He basically said that this is what, if it goes to production. I mean, he didn't use those words. I'm saying that because he's like, when it does. But the only real difference is that the mirrors, since they're cameras, that isn't finalized because obviously in certain markets the regulations are different. Like here in the U.S., you can't utilize those. But what I think is interesting is, yeah, I mean, where are you going to build this for one? But like you said, Jeff, Fisker is a designer. And I think that is kind of the key here, is that he's really good at designing vehicles, but he hires everyone to build them. He hires everyone to, do pretty much, he's a marketer and a designer, essentially.
Yeah.
They don't build anything at Fisker. They outsource it, which not a problem. There are some automakers that do that. But I want to know where this is going to be built. I read it. It was kind of funny because I was like, how many employees does Fisker have? According to the last publication of their quarterly stock information on, I think it was Financial Times, 850 employees, which I thought was well, that's kind of a lot for what they do. But I mean, they did say in this vehicle in particular,
really big design studio,
right? They said that they were going to be doing something with the computers here. So they're working on building out their own in-house computer system for the car. Okay, cool. But the a company like Canoe, they also have 850 employees, and they don't have any vehicles on the road at all.
Yeah.
So
Canoe is another interesting one where you're like, all right, build a car or stop building concepts already. Do something. But I think for Fisker, I know they talked about Foxconn, and I know they talked about Magna for a little bit. They just need to do it. They just need to go with Magna or go with Foxconn and just say build it, because at this point I'm tired of seeing so many concepts come out from them and really do nothing with them.
Yeah, I'm concerned that the final execution is not going to be that great, because I know the first drives of the Ocean weren't very positive.
Yeah, that's what I heard as well.
Yeah, they said the car looked great. And I actually really like the way the Ocean looks. So I'm not just gonna rag on Fisker. But it just everybody said the car was half baked.
Yeah, not complete. I heard a lot of people the software wasn't fully functional, and they had some issues with the power lift gates and stuff like that.
Yeah, ride was weird, power delivery was weird. Honestly, it sounded like a lot what I experienced with VinFast, but I won't go there. But I just wonder, you can't do that in this day and age. You have to come ready because everybody else is, right?
Well, or at least and that feels like a symptom of Fisker actually being a design studio, not an automaker in that kind of sense. The idea of all these cars is quite cool, and details like the Houdini trunk, which feels like such a completely unnecessary thing if you're aiming for a low price point.
The solar panel as well.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm not against that. I quite like that as an idea, or something
as an idea.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. But I mean, solar panels for vehicles, that there have been quite a lot of vehicles, even with them installed. There's actually I think a Nigerian bus company that makes buses that charge either a hybrid or an EV system from on-roof solar panels that I've forgotten the name of, but I'll drop it somewhere. Yeah, I'm not against that. To be honest, I think it's kind of a deficiency of some automakers that they're not considering that kind of thing, at least in countries where you could get a meaningful amount of power out of it. not being able to build a coherent car that is actually a drivable, acceptable product for a customer is a much bigger barrier than not being able to, like, I can sit down here and invent like 12 EVs that would be really cool to see. Like, in fact, we could probably do that as like a game segment at some point, like the Fisker. But like if you can't actually make it, it doesn't really matter what it is. Or
I also think that if Fisker does figure it out, I feel like they're probably the only ones that could probably really give the business to Tesla, because their cars are interesting. You know,
They are interesting. I mean, people are excited. I hear so many people, what about Fisker? What about Fisker? And to me, I'm just like, well, I'll believe it when I see it type thing.
Yeah.
Just because I think he's very good at marketing. But yeah, that's just my kind of take on it. What I thought was really interesting that I read was, again, from the Financial Times. They had said that Fisker was in the top 10 of stocks that were shorted. So to me, a lot of this is probably also like, hey, here's some good, like, look at us, we're doing good though. Like, please.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
One of the top 10 stocks that are shorted. That's crazy.
that feels bad. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's quite a lot of competition to be like the GameStop of EVs or whatever, but like,
Yikes.
yeah.
The more I look at these pictures, the more I like the design. Maybe I'm coming around a little bit.
I really hate it.
Villain v. Villain is just switching up today. I don't even know how to feel. Okay, we have Carl in San Diego that just wrote, the Pear wants to solve the problem of a cheap EV, but batteries are keeping EVs pricey. Only Chinese or, sorry, I'm being blocked by an emoji, or low-wage manufacturing will allow a cheap, full-sized EV. I wish more were building 180 miles of range. That's a good take, I will say. I think a lot of people are still, like, the general volume of people are still nervous about having such little range, especially in climates like mine where I live in Michigan. It gets cold, so you have a little bit of hit on range during those months.
I'm okay with 180 miles, depending on the price. I don't know. When I first started doing a lot of EV stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, it's not enough. And now I'm like, you know what? That's fine.
Okay, so then what did you think about the Mazda MX-30?
Oh, that wasn't fun. I'm not paying all that for that for a little bit of range.
I love that.
That's the thing. Like, if you can offset range to price, and like, because I think there's a lot of people, like, you know, there's at least where I live, there's a big secondhand market for original Leafs and Zoes that, you know, really don't have very much range, but people want them because they want to switch to an EV. And so if this is something where it is an acceptable price point, where it is realistic that people will buy it, there's a lot of people. Okay, I appreciate that there are people who have genuine demands for a long range car. Totally understand that. This isn't saying everything needs to be short range, but for people who don't need that, like that, and 180, like, even if you did try and do a long trip in it, that nearly 200 miles is a pretty acceptable point to stop and charge for a little bit, depending on things like the fast charging rate, the battery management in the Fisker, which is another thing where, like, I don't know if they've really got that down. I don't think we've got any evidence that they do yet, etc., that kind of thing. And in fact, that kind of leads us on to the next bit, I guess. Kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to interject and say I have an iMev that I drive every day, so I think that's kind of like,
that's so cute.
That's redefined my range. You know, concept of range anxiety.
What year is it?
2012.
Okay, and so what's your range when you're fully charged?
So when it was new, it was 62 miles, but with battery degradation, I think I have about 28, 30.
Okay. This actually gets into, that's insane. This actually gets into our next topic that we're going to talk about, which is the study that Recurrent Auto came out with about DC fast charging and degradation in particular, because they wanted to match up to see if you're DC fast charging a lot, does it truly degrade the battery? Now, I will say that in this study, they used Tesla vehicles, and they are known to have some of the best technology as far as battery chemistry and innovation, I would say. But this study basically said that DC fast charging over time, I think they had up to 2,000 days with the Model 3s, and there were about 12,000 vehicles that were studied in total. But and this one is for the Model Y that you see on the screen here. The study was 4,400 vehicles for this particular vehicle over a 1,000-day period. They really just showed that the degradation is very close. There isn't really an impact as far as DC fast charging goes, and very similar results for the Model 3. So although it is a limited set, we're talking about Tesla Model Y and Model 3 vehicles. It is over either 1,000 or 2,000 days. That's a good sign, right? And Kevin just wrote an article about something along the lines of this, right?
Did I?
Or maybe, I don't know, he linked something. Oh, they don't need a massive battery or fast charging to give up gas. I see. Your Prius.
Oh, I sure did.
Sorry, we're bundling this in.
Oh, that's all right. I think this is great news, but I also wonder how long it'll hold. I wonder if we still need more time. I mean, 2,000 days is like 5.5 years, which is a long time, but also that's like the first owner, if you really think about it. Like that's like roughly the same amount of time that somebody would pay for one loan term. So like I really wonder what happens to these cars, a little bit longer than that. Because I mean, I can speak to my iMev. My iMev has lost so much range, and a lot of it's happened within like the last year, and it can't fast charge. I have the one without it. So, but once again, I don't know. I think this is one of these things that we will literally have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
It is dependent on the model too, right? Because using the Model Y and the Model 3, a lot of the Tesla stuff, like you mentioned, they typically do better with degradation than a lot of the other ones do. I know so many Nissan Leafs out there that have
first
just
gen
awful, first gen Leafs with awful range after 5-6 years. So, but like Kevin said, I think it's just going to take time and a little more studying of different cars.
Yeah, and those were passive cooling too, so keep that in mind, is that Model 3, Model Y have active thermal management, so there's cooling in the battery pack, whereas on the Leaf, that was like one of their huge major issues, is that they couldn't control the temperature of the battery in places like Arizona, where it got super, super hot. That's not good.
Yeah,
Leafs are still passive, that's true.
A lot of this. So I found when I was looking into this before the show, I found a 2021 study that looked at a similar thing, and its overall conclusion was that there was some degradation, possibly connected to fast charging, but a much bigger factor was actually the battery chemistry. So whether it was NMC or NCA, and NCA was generally better. We're now seeing LFP. Lithium iron phosphate batteries kind of actually genuinely be put into EVs, and those will probably perform a lot better. We're seeing some really interesting research into things like, because one of the things that severely affects the degradation and can it is basically cathode limitation, and stuff like I was reading a study yesterday about how you can basically do the same thing as pickling to the electrolyte, and that massively mitigates that kind of degradation. And I sort of feel, although this hasn't looked at long enough, we're looking at what might as well be like infantile batteries and battery management systems and charging management systems and chargers and like stuff like that in terms of, I'm always a little bit wary about I'm also, and I couldn't find a lot of information about this because I think manufacturers are very cautious about like avoiding anyone really knowing about this. But what I would be more interested in is the effect of degradation of the inverter of DC fast charging versus slow charging, because I suspect that is the piece that is much more likely to be subject to stress, especially on like earlier models. You know, we're seeing much better inverters hit the market now. We're seeing much better technologies, but like again, when you look at older EVs, when you look at kind of those first, the inverter was always a bit that was, there was a bit of compromise to it when that was first kind of brought in. So I'm going to stop talking, but like I think I would be wary of either projecting data from this onto EVs in the future, because it's looking at older technologies and technologies that are rapidly changing, and also that, I think it's maybe looking at the wrong parts of the car in terms of stress.
Well, I do know that this is kind of a big thing for Recurrent. So if you guys haven't heard of what Recurrent Auto is, basically they're a company that collects all this data on EVs. So they give you, you can sign up with them and get, basically it's like a dongle that plugs into your EV, and they'll monitor the health of your battery. So you get these free reports over time. But they also use this data, obviously, to provide studies like this. They work with dealers so that these reports especially will be helpful for used EVs. I did actually an interview on my channel. I have a segment called In Charge where I talk in interviews with CEOs and a lot of different EV leaders. And I did an interview with Scott Case, who is the CEO of Recurrent. And it was really interesting because I mostly, this was last year because I wanted to talk about the used EV tax credit. But they provide these, it's almost like a Carfax for your EV to talk about the battery health over a period of time. So it's kind of interesting that they're doing this. And I do think that that is an open market to tackle, because people, that's a huge concern, is the price point of a battery once, you know, you buy a used EV. So I think it's interesting. And I know that they have more data on a bunch of other EVs, but to pick the ones that have kind of the best technology is, you know, it's a limited set. We'll leave it at that. But all right. Anybody else have any comments or questions on this study? Very interesting. All right, let's move on then.
Oh, I just wanted to bring in something from like the comments on YouTube, which is talking about like, I mean, the problem with fast charging still is that there isn't very good fast charging networks. Like being able to fast charge is still kind of a privilege. So, like worrying about whether fast charging is going to degrade your battery is a pretty minor concern for a lot of people, because it's difficult to find a fast charger.
Well, I will actually also say that I should probably provide this information. Is I also have a Tesla Model S, and it's a 2016, and actually 80% of like the life of that car is like road trip and supercharging miles. And just to kind of give you a perspective of my car, is it originally was rated for 300 miles EPA estimated range. And now at this stage in 2023, what is that, 7 years later, it can fully charge up to 270 miles. So I have about 10% degradation, and a lot of it is supercharging. So that's a 2016 model year. As we can imagine, those 3s and Ys with the newer tech and smaller batteries, mine's a 90D, might be a little bit different of an impact. But I think that's interesting as well, is that my Model S, with mostly supercharging charging, is a 10% hit in degradation. So that's super awesome stats. Well, thank you. I just wanted to share. I almost forgot. All right, let's move on to the next topic then, which I think is some more Tesla news, if I'm not wrong. Are we going to run our cute little thing, Kyle? Our little Tesla news. That's more like it. Okay, one of the last things that we did kind of touch on the price cuts of the Model 3 and obviously the Project Highland that's come to life with the refresh Model 3. But the one thing we haven't talked about yet was Elon's V12 FSD demonstration. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this because is this good or is this bad?
They have to stop calling this thing full self-driving.
Yeah.
Surely. Like, it amazes me that in the US in particular, like where you have to put warnings on coffee cups that things are hot and whatever, that you are allowed to sell a piece of technology called full self-driving when it's not. Like, it factually is not full self-driving. It's like 4 layers of autonomy below that. And I don't know. It peeves me so much that it's missold and like misdescribed and creating this dangerous thing on roads because people don't understand what they actually have. That I can't even get excited about it or interested.
Well, I mean, they've been trying to roll out, or they've been, testing and updating full self-driving or whatever whatever people want to call it for a long time. And I just think that this latest test looks interesting. I think it's from what the videos I've seen, it looks like it could be really good. But again, it still takes a lot more testing than a live video he posted on X that, I need to see more before I can really make a judgment on how much improved this is over some of the previous full self-driving stuff we've seen.
Yeah. Didn't it roll a stop sign?
I think there were like two disengagements. Like it was about to, and then he had to like interfere with it.
Yeah.
I mean, that feels pretty basically bad.
Yeah. Like you can't do that. Like
No.
I full stop. You can't do that.
Yeah, like the sign says, don't do that.
I think it's interesting seeing the like construction zones and everything like that. But back a few years ago, they kind of did something similar with the Model X, and I know this is an upgraded version of FSD, so there is some advancements here. But I want to see this performing in a place other than in Palo Alto in California, where everyone is, providing all this data because, Tesla is very popular in that area and it is saturated. A lot of people have FSD that they're testing on those roads. So the cars are, with their neural network, learning a lot in that region. But, I live in Michigan, as I mentioned. I want to see this in conditions that are not the sunny California, perfect 100%. And of course, they did have some construction zones, but I want to see something different. Like nighttime, maybe Christmas time when there's some snow on the ground, Christmas lights flashing, interfering with some of this stuff. That's kind of my take on it. I like seeing there's improvements over time, but stop saying that it's going to be 100% ready to go by the end of the year, every year for the last how many years.
Yeah.
Give me something else. Like, I want to see something like more shocking and awe-inspiring.
I'll be convinced that full self-driving is ready when they show me a video of a Model S driving on the Palmetto Expressway toward the Miami airport at 9 a.m. Then I'll be convinced. But yeah, in general, like you said, just we see it on the same road so many times. There are so many terrible roads and highways out here in the US. Like, I think we need to see way more of it before I'm convinced of anything.
There's actually a roundabout in Ann Arbor in Michigan, which like it's apparently the most crash prone or most incident prone roundabout in the US, and they only recently there was like a scientific academic study where they modeled the behavior of cars on that roundabout in particular, in order to like feed it into AI driving systems. So yeah, you're 100% right. Like, it's literally harder to drive in Michigan than it is in Palo Alto.
I don't know. To me, I'm just I do want this to be real, and I'm excited because I think that Tesla's doing some amazing things as far as like developing this technology. I feel like not hopeless, but I'm tired of hearing it over and over again that it is like this new version is going to do it. This is it. This is it. And I was also interested to hear like, okay, with the refresh of the Model 3, is hardware 4 on that? Like, is there high definition radar? Like, what is the next thing that's going to get them to a level where they think it's actually like usable on a day-to-day basis and anywhere across the country?
Yeah.
I don't know. And for $15K, no less, our other car is a short-range Model 3, and I wouldn't buy self-driving for it, $1K. This is interesting because a lot of people are like, autopilot is amazing. And I think autopilot is, I have a lot of issues with my autopilot. I also have a Model Y. And every time I use it, and mind you, every time I'm driving, I use autopilot, I have phantom braking, and I really dislike it, and it makes me very upset because I want them to fix autopilot, because I feel as if I have the autopilot that comes with the car and it performs this way, I'm not really encouraged to buy FSD. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way. But apparently, if you have the FSD stack, like if you ever subscribe to either the $200 a month plan, or if you paid for it outright for 15 grand or whatever it is, or what it was when you bought your car, that is a very different experience as far as your autopilot goes, because it's utilizing different sets of that technology that is used in FSD. And you don't get that as much as far as phantom braking goes. And I have a vision only on my Model Y system, so I don't have any radar. And that's what's frustrating me. Do you think people will be held back from the experience of autopilot and going into FSD?
I mean,
Or is that just me?
I think if people are really determined to get FSD, I mean, I'm not anti like ADAS in general. I think there's some really, really cool things that can be done with ADAS. There's definitely been some really neat stuff that I've seen car companies do, and where the car effectively can drive itself. BMW have a thing that notices if you pass out in the driver's seat and you're not responsive, where it pulls over, which for me as someone with epilepsy is like, that's a hugely like important feature, and something that I think is really cool to develop. I don't really know if cars driving themselves, like, why are you buying a car that you've got to maintain and buy new tires on, and you've got to buy new inverters, and you've got to worry about the battery, you've got to go plug it in yourself? Why not just get a Bolt, like as in like a ride share? Why would you pay essentially like a year's worth of Uber fares for sitting in something that then you have to park and also pay for?
Yeah.
Well, I think kind of Tesla's business model eventually with this, and this is eventually, is that the fleet will turn into rideshare so that you can have your car go make money for you while you're. So that's why they see it as an asset.
But I don't
really,
want
that would
people
make
to
money.
throw up in my car.
Also, are people really taking that many rides?
It's probably in San Francisco and Palo Alto, where they're based primarily, I will say, doing these tests. Robotaxi will also increase greenhouse gas emissions because of deadheading that exists in all taxi scenarios. So, yeah, that's why they think they really want to get people on ride shares with this kind of stuff. But, yeah, it's just interesting. It is great to see Tesla improve on the technology, but ultimately, we want to see it become real and not just keep saying that it's better and it's going to come this year. So that's just how I feel about it. All right, let's move on to our last story that we're going to talk about, which is driving the dual motor version of the Rivian R1T. And Kevin, I would love for you to take it away, because I think this is really interesting that Rivian has now produced their enduro motor in-house. So could you tell us about how that feels, especially compared to what you've probably experienced in quad motor variants that those motors were provided by Bosch. So this is kind of an interesting subject.
They feel the same, and that's the story.
That's good though.
It honestly, it really is the story. Like between the two, I mean, there's a lot of under the skin differences to make those dual motors work. But I think the most important thing for the consumer is that they feel about the same. The only real difference is, like for example, they had us drive, I think, dual motor performance variants, which I think is about 665 horsepower, which is technically down from the 830 of the quad motor. But I mean, like, both are staggeringly high amounts of horsepower, right? The only real difference is what they're capable of off-road. Unfortunately, we didn't get that much time with the vehicles. Like, we got maybe 10 minutes with each, with the dual motor and the quad motor on a closed course at Rivian's Normal, Illinois plant. But there was one instance in particular where they had us go up sort of a technical rock crawling-ish course that had us come to a complete stop and then just sort of like, accelerate out of it to see what the vehicles are capable of. And the quad motor is definitely superior at how it manages torque, since it has like a motor at each wheel, so it can physically put the power down. Versus the dual motor, it still can torque vector the power from side to side, but it does it in like with a brake-based ESP style. So it kind of just applies brake pressure to one wheel to induce torque. And it's not that the dual motor struggled. It's just that like it wasn't as good. But I think once again the real story is how they really do feel the same. They're both really fast, and then the dual motor gets more range because the dual motor is more efficient than the quad motor.
Now, did you test out the large packs, or did they have max packs there?
So they said that they were making them. They said they were making them, but the ones we were driving were not max packs.
Boo.
Unfortunately, right? But I did think it was interesting because the Enduro drive unit is also already being used in the Amazon delivery vans, and they also told me that the standard battery is what powers the Amazon delivery vans.
Okay, interesting.
So it's interesting that like now Rivian has all the pieces and parts for all of its models up and running, right? So eventually they told me they said they'll start installing the standard range batteries in Rivian trucks soon here. They wouldn't give me a date, but they did say soon.
Well, it's sort of the strategy that GM and a lot of others are following, where you introduce your biggest, most powerful, quad motor model to start, and then you sort of trickle down to the dual motor. And it's good to hear that it's basically the same. Like, it drives the same, it feels the same. You still get 665 horsepower, which is a lot. I know it's like technically way less than the quad motor, but it's still a ton. And what, 73 grand for this truck? I honestly think the dual motor could be a big winner for Rivian, especially with how expensive the Lightnings are getting, and we still haven't seen what some of GM's more affordable stuff. So I'm really intrigued by this truck.
Yeah, I personally think that Rivian's probably going to jack up the price of the quad motor. It just felt like the quad motor was kind of a stopgap. Like, we need to get these trucks into customer driveways, and we need to do it now. Because the dual motor, when they told me that the dual motor was, I think, 35% less expensive to implement, and it's literally made like a few steps away from where they're assembling all the other vehicles, I would be 0% surprised if they really start pushing quad motor equipped vehicles dual motor equipped vehicles instead of the quad motor.
Well, I can speak from experience because I have a max pack on order, and I originally, for my reservation back when I reserved it in 2019, I had a quad motor max pack, and they took the quad motor away from me. They told me that you can't have that. You have to go to a dual motor setup with the max pack. And just last week, I got another email saying that we're delaying the estimated delivery time for this again, which is like the 5th time this has happened. But now it's like January, February 2024 is when I'm expected to get this. And it was supposed to be from this last update like this fall. And some people actually have responded on my tweet that I posted about this and said that they had an update as well, but that they're going to get theirs before the end of the year in November, December. And obviously I'm assuming that's because of, you know, location where you have service centers, and also like, yeah, how easy it is logistically to get those cars to you, amongst other things. So that's probably, you know, part of it, and timing. I mean, I was a fairly early reservation, but maybe some people are before me. But yeah, it just hurts my heart with the Max Pack because I really want mine. But I think what's kind of a interesting thing to think about here is like, well, why didn't Rivian build their motors in-house when they first started? And they were stealth for a really long period of time. So I think it was probably hard for them to get the engineering people that they needed without being a known name in the business. So they kind of had to go the supplier route. But I'm really glad to see that they're starting to produce in-house stuff, because I think more automakers, especially ones like GM, need to invest in more engineering and this kind of stuff to get the packs smaller, make them more efficient, and produce your own motors so that you can get the cost down for your company. So I think this is going to help Rivian as far as like profit margins and keeping the costs more manageable for them, because they had to jack up those later reservations, and the differences between the cars. Like, for example, my vehicle versus the new reservations that people were ordering with the configuration I had was like $20,000. And so that's why I'm holding on tight. I'm like, I know it's like an appreciating asset technically, even though they took a lot of the things away from me, like the camp kitchen and the dual or the quad motors and things like that. I think it's important for the health of the company to be able to make sure that you're not losing as much money when producing these vehicles.
Yeah. There were actually, I take that back. There were a couple other differences. There are a few off-road modes that the dual motor does not have. Like I think the quad motor has like a special off-road crawling mode. The dual motor doesn't have that.
Interesting. But otherwise, the interior and everything else felt pretty much the same.
Yeah, you can spec them exactly the same. They for all intents and purposes, they're the same truck.
The only thing you don't get is the yellow, what is it, the yellow accents on the badge, and then the yellow brakes. They kind of just get rid of those, which is super minor. But
yeah, because those are still designated for the quads, I think they said, or something like that. But well, cool.
Can I say some tedious, nerdy stuff?
Of course, we love tedious nerdiness.
I know that like manufacturers aren't really in the habit of publishing this, and I don't think Rivian do from just like having a quick look. But I would be interested what the difference between the amount of range extension you can get from regeneration with the quad motors to the dual motors is, because generally like vehicles aren't regenerating equal to the power output anyway. But I'd be interested whether the dual motor system being simpler to manage in terms of feeding that back, comparison to the complexity of a quad motor system. And actually, I don't know if all four even fed back to the battery, but like, yeah, I'd be kind of, that's definitely something I'm going to look into in terms of how much you can actually extend the original kind of like battery range of a vehicle with that.
Yeah, I think that's also interesting too, because I know they told me when I was on the launch, there's a bit, they kind of changed up the way the power is managed with the dual motor. Like for example, I think with the quad motor, it will generally power all four wheels unless you put it in conserve mode, and then it turns the rear axle off, so then it's front wheel drive, versus the dual motor actually does that by default. And when I asked, they said like, oh, well, we did it partially for dynamics, for vehicle dynamics, but also for regenerative braking, because it says like most of it comes from the front anyways. So I feel like it might be more aggressive, or at least better at recapturing in dual motor form, But I don't know. That's probably a Rivian question. I don't know if they'll answer that, but
Well, I will email them and see if I can get an answer for next week.
I'm just hoping like for when Max Pack. I'm just like, I really hope that when I get my Max Pack, I have like a heat pump and some other kind of like cool engineering that they're working on. Like I know they're hard at work, but I really want to see that efficiency improve. If I could get, the large pack, but it has the, efficiency and the range
Yeah.
ratings of the 400 miles of range that I'm looking for, then I think that would be incredible. But yeah, smaller battery packs and more efficiency is, I think, always on the horizon, and I'm sure they're working on it, but we'll see. We'll see what I get in January if it comes in January.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm still crossing
Fingers
my
crossed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Anybody else have anything to add on that last story? We are probably over time, so we got to wrap it up here. But I want to thank you guys for joining us. I know it's a new crew, so we appreciate you joining us and having many other EV nerds to join the community to talk about this kind of stuff on a weekly basis. So Hazel will probably be here next week. We appreciate you, Kevin and Jeff, coming in for filling in for our other dudes and being guests and giving your experiences and insights on the rest of these stories here. I think we'll have Alex and hopefully Patrick next week. So thank you guys again for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Awesome.